Hello, FP World History students. We are drawing to a close on our course. This is the second to the last chapter, and the last chapter we'll be doing before the AP exam. This chapter is called End of Empire, and as you may recall, the time period before the mid-20th century was an era of huge empires being proclaimed or claimed by mostly countries in Europe and neo-colonialism by the United States. And so we're going to look at what happens after World War II and how these different parts of the world become independent. In some places, we're going to see wars of liberation, such as in Algeria. We're going to see that Cold War politics continue throughout the whole mid part of the 20th century up until almost the end of the 20th century. And we see the development of something called the Third World for non-aligned countries. These are countries that are not aligned with either the Soviet Union or with the US and her allies. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Throughout all of these end of empire, we're going to see a huge problem with ethnic and religious conflicts. This is just a preview for you about what we'll be talking about. Today we'll be looking at India, and of course in India we have a conflict between Hindu and Muslim people living in India, and India will experience a partition, and that will break off the east or west corner rather of India and make it Pakistan. Palestine, also an area of conflict. Here we have the religious groups, the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims all coexisting in Palestine fairly peacefully. But after World War I, and then especially after World War II, as many people immigrated to Israel or to Palestine, we're going to see the creation of the State of Israel. In Africa, there are numerous examples of the end of empire there. The problem with much of Africa is that when the borders were set by the Europeans primarily, they did not take into consideration existing tribal or language groups, and so this will lead to a lot of instability throughout Africa. And we'll be looking at these over a period of several days, combining both documentaries as well as notes. So let's take a look at India first, the coming of self-rule. We know that Gandhi had been seeking home rule for India. There had been things like boycotts of British textiles, not really encouraging industry a whole lot, but wanting definitely to have Britain out of India. Nehru and Gandhi wanted to keep India together. They did not want to separate India into Muslim and Hindu portions. This was known as communalism. So the idea behind communalism is that both the Muslims and the Hindus would be able to live together and to be treated equally. There were, however, many people that did not believe that this could possibly happen because the Hindu majority was so much greater than the the Hindu majority was so much greater than the Muslim minority. So Muhammad al-Jinnah formed the Muslim League, and he was a separatist, and he made calls for a separate Muslim state. The main reason is he feared Hindu persecution, and that even with a government of home rule, that the Hindus would still be in the minority, and that the Hindu needs would not be as I keep saying this wrong. The Muslims will still be in the minority, and that the Hindus will persecute the Muslims. The Day of Direct Action occurred on August 16th, 1946. You're actually going to watch a video about this, and this was actually very gruesome, violent action. It's called the Great Calcutta Killing. Riots there killed 5,000, and it struck both Muslim and Hindu alike. And so, like I say, you will be watching a video about this today after you finish these couple slides of notes, and do some reflection on what happened in India during this time. So finally, British cede to independence for India. The British say, okay, India, you're on your own. Basically, what the Indians did is that they had forces in India, they had police, they had military there, but they completely withdrew them, and they completely withdrew any help for the people that were there, especially as the Day of Direct Action took place the British military just sat back and watched. In 1947, the partition occurred, was approved by the United Nations. We have Muslim Pakistan, and we have Hindu and Sikh India. Remember, the Sikh is kind of a syncretic faith, and it was sort of in the northwestern part of India, combining elements of Hinduism and Islam. This caused a rapid forced migration beginning August 14th to 15th of 1947. As you can see from the picture of this car, this, people just piled all the possessions that they had. And so we have Muslims moving from India into Pakistan, and we have Hindus that are in Pakistan moving into India. This created huge problems. There were stories of people leaving their young children on the side of the road because they couldn't carry them anymore, or people just dying as they're walking. 500,000 people died in this forced migration alone on both sides. It didn't really care what side you were on. People died. And this also created a situation where there were 10 to 12 million refugees, both in India and in Pakistan. So the Bandung Conference convened in Indonesia in 1955. At this point, India moves towards a non-alignment position. I already discussed this a little bit, but this would be called the third path. In other words, not aligning with either of the world's superpowers, but finding their own way. So Indian democracy flourished under Indira Gandhi from 1966 to 1977. She was the daughter of Nehru, who we have talked about before, and was not related to Mohandas Gandhi, who we have also talked about before. The Green Revolution was a huge scientific revolution that occurred in India. And as we know, the population of India is very, very large. And the Green Revolution allowed for larger agricultural yields and made it possible for the population of India to be fed, basically. However, there were repressive policies put in place to slow population growth, including forced sterilization. Now, I'm not really sure what the criteria was for someone to be sterilized, but we know at any time that is done, it is, for many people, that is considered to be a violation of one's natural rights. However, in India, they felt it was necessary, and this was done. Indira Gandhi was assassinated by Sikh bodyguards after an attack on Sikh extremists in Amritsar in 1984. You might remember Amritsar was the place where the Gandhi's supporters were meeting in peacefully, even though there was like a law that they weren't supposed to be meeting, and they were massacred by the British. In this case, Hindu Indians attacked the Sikhs and Sikh extremists, and then the Sikh bodyguards took revenge by killing Indira. Okay, so for today, you are going to watch a part of The Day That India Burned, and check back tomorrow for the second part of The Day That India Burned. Thank you.